When you're dealing in real estate, there's tons of forms that need to be filled out, and those forms from time to time have to be revised. The most recent one and the biggest one that's been revised is the property condition report, and we're going to talk about that on this show. It's the Real Estate Show. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. My name is Rick Naples. I am the broker-owner of Zone Realty LLC, and we're filming today from the Zone Realty office in Plainville, Connecticut. I want to talk about on this show a brand new form, well actually an old form that's been revised that is now going to be required to be filled out by every seller that's selling a residential property. And that's the seller's residential property condition disclosure. Now that form has been around for years, and it's the form, if you've ever sold a house that you're familiar with, that just has you go through and answer questions about your home. How old is it? How long have you been there? What's the condition of the roof? And so on and so forth. Well, there's been some new changes that have come along and some new situations here in our state which have required that form to be revised. And that new revision is now required to be used by all sellers from August 10th, 2018, which is this year, going forward. Now your realtor is going to advise you about the changes in the form, and you're going to go through it and fill it out as you always do. And it's required, folks, because if you don't fill out this form, you possibly could be fined up to $500 at the closing for not providing this information to your buyer, okay? Now, the form itself is 7 pages long. It's pretty intense because it asks some pretty thorough questions about your home. The best advice that I can give a seller out there is take your time, read each question thoroughly, and answer it as truthfully as you possibly can. Yes, no, you don't know, or now a new category doesn't apply. It's very important that you convey this information as correctly and honestly as you can to a potential buyer. Because that's just one piece of the many things that a buyer looks at in making the decision as to whether or not to purchase your home. It's also a form that they're going to refer back to should they do a home inspection and something come up in the home inspection that might not have been reflected on the property condition report. So that's why you want to be truthful, folks, and you want to be really honest about anything that you know about your home. I mean, after all, you're living in it, so you know the home, you know all its quirks, all its bumps, all its grinds, whatever might be out there. So you want to disclose that in the report and answer it as honestly as you possibly can. Let's sit back and take a look at this presentation, and I'll be back to talk some more about the property condition report and what's actually in it. talking here on the Real Estate Show about this residential property condition report disclosure that all sellers are required to fill out when they're going to enter or before they're going to enter into a transaction to sell their home. It's a way for them to convey information about the property to the potential buyer. And the questions that are asked in the form are pretty precise. It goes through everything on the house, from the roof all the way down to the basement. And now they've added a section which is concerned about the foundation. You know, here in our state, we've had a lot of problems about foundations, especially concrete ones. So now there are 3 or 4 questions in this report that specifically ask questions about the foundation that the seller is now required to answer. Some of the things that are also in the report they might be a little bit difficult for the seller to answer, but as I said, you do the best you can. And if you don't know, you check off unknown. You want to be as honest as you possibly can. You want to prepare when you're going to put your home on the market to be able to answer some of these questions that are going to be asked on this report. For instance, it always surprises me as a realtor when I go and I list a home on how the seller has no idea how old the roof of the home is. That's a very important question. It's a question that the buyer's going to ask. Usually you can find out or get a good general idea when you had your home inspection done. The home inspector is going to tell you that the roof looks like it's this kind of roof and it's about this age and so on and so forth. If the roof is an original roof, then that's what you want to disclose, that it's the original roof of the house. If there's been any updating to it or there's been any repairs done to it, you want to disclose that. Again, you want to be as honest as you possibly can. It also asks you questions about the utilities of the house, the furnace, the electrical systems, the plumbing system, the water system, and so on and so forth. And of course, because you lived in the house, you should be able to answer those questions as honestly as you possibly can. And again, it does have a column that says unknown. So if you're not sure, check off unknown. But if you do have any idea, make sure that you check off your yes or no answers. And if it asks you for supporting information, make copies of that information and have it available for the buyer to be able to inspect. Let's take a look at this presentation about the property disclosure and some of the changes that are in it, and I'll be back right after to discuss it a little bit more. as you can see by that previous presentation, there's been a lot of what I'll call housekeeping issues that were taken care of in the property condition report. You know, there were a few things that were discovered by the realtors over the years in using that report that weren't quite right. Things as simple as typos, as far as a word misspelled, plurals not used where a plural should be. And there was also no place for a buyer or a seller to initial that they've been made aware of that particular answer or that question or whatever it might be. So they went through and they tried to organize the report so that it's a little bit easier to fill out, a little bit easier to follow, and also addresses some of those missing items that were there and correct the ones that were incorrect. Then they also added a whole nother section, again as I mentioned, about concrete foundations. Specifically, they asked you, the seller, if your foundation of your home is made of concrete. And if it's not made of concrete, what was the material that was used to make that foundation? In regards to a concrete foundation, it asks you if you are aware of any issues with that foundation. And if so, where, what, how, when, and so on and so forth. If you've had any repairs done to the foundation, or if you've had any claims done because of the foundation issue. You want to make sure that you disclose all that as honestly and as completely and support it with any information that you have to your potential buyer. They've gone one step further now to even put in this report an advisory to the buyer of the house, making them aware that if the house has a concrete foundation, they now have the right to have an engineer come in and inspect that foundation for any potential problems that there may be. So as a seller, you need to be aware of that. Let's sit back and look at this presentation. We'll be back with some more commentary about this property condition report. When you purchase a home, you have a lot of opportunity to really get to know the house that you're buying. And there's a number of different things that are going to be presented to you to give you all the information you need to know about that particular house and purchase. Now, of course, you're going to do a home inspection. The home inspector will go through the house from top to bottom and give you advice and opinions about the different operations of the house. But it all starts with the property condition report, which is what we're talking about here on this show. The seller, the person who's lived in the house, is filling out information to give to you, the buyer, to tell you about certain things concerning the house's condition or situation. They're filling it out as honestly as they possibly can. Now, it's a good thing to remember that when it comes to your turn to sell your home, that you also are going to be required to fill out this condition report. So any information you've gathered over the time that you've been in the home or any changes that happen, it's really important that you make note of those changes so that you can put them in the report for the next buyer that comes along, and they can subsequently pass that to any future buyers that come along. Let's sit back and look at this quick little presentation, and I'll be back with the section of the show I call the Real Estate Mailbag. This is the portion of the real estate show I call the real estate mailbag. My opportunity to address questions that are sent to me here at the real estate show or just asked to me when I'm out and about in the general public. We're talking about the property condition report, your way as a seller to convey information to a future buyer about the condition of your home and why it's so important to fill that out as completely and truthfully and honestly as you can. But are there situations where you don't need a property condition report? Well, there are certain situations in the sale of a residential property where the report does not come into play. Two of the biggest reasons are because there's nobody to fill out the report. There's a situation where the house is in foreclosure or it's been foreclosed on. A bank now owns the house. There's nobody living in the house, so thus there's nobody that can fill out a property disclosure report to give the buyer an idea of what's going on with the house. There's also a situation where a house maybe not foreclosed, but has been handed down to a relative who's never lived in the house. And they also too don't have the information to fill out the property condition report. And there's a couple of other ones that are out there too. That's why it's so important that you do a home inspection. You really want to make sure that you're aware of what it is you're actually purchasing when you go to buy a house. So have those inspections done. My name is Rick Naples. This has been the Real Estate Show. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.